Alchemy only reveals itself to those who are ready for the 7 portals of transformation. If you're watching this right now, something deep inside you has been calling. Not everyone who stumbles upon ancient wisdom is ready to receive it. The Vedas, humanity's oldest spiritual texts, tell us that knowledge appears only when the student is prepared to transform. For over 5,000 years, these sacred writings have contained the most advanced understanding of consciousness and reality, disguised as spiritual teachings, but actually representing the pinnacle of human scientific discovery. The ancient rishis, the seers of the Vedic tradition, were not religious figures as modern interpretation suggests. They were quantum physicists, consciousness researchers, and masters of what we now call neuroscience. And they understood that the universe operates on principles that Western science is only beginning to rediscover. The Upanishads speak of Brahman, the unified field of consciousness, which quantum mechanics now describes as the zero-point field, the underlying fabric of reality from which all matter and energy emerge. But here's what most people miss. This knowledge doesn't reveal itself to the casual seeker. The Katha Upanishad states clearly that the self cannot be attained by study, by intellect, or by hearing alone. It reveals itself only to one whom it chooses, to one who has undergone the necessary preparation. This preparation involves passing through 7 distinct portals of transformation, each one dissolving another layer of illusion that keeps you trapped in limited perception. Think about your life right now. Have you noticed patterns repeating? The same challenges appearing in different forms, the same emotional reactions surfacing despite your best efforts to change. This isn't coincidence. According to the Vedic understanding, you're experiencing the law of karma, which isn't punishment or reward, but simply the universe's feedback system showing you exactly where your consciousness needs to evolve. Each repeated pattern is an invitation to step through the next portal of transformation. The first portal is perhaps the most challenging because it requires something that goes against every survival instinct you've developed, the complete dissolution of your constructed identity. The Vedas call this process Mrityunjaya, conquering death while still alive. But this death isn't physical, it's the death of the ego mind, the collection of memories, beliefs, and conditioning that you've mistaken for your true self. Modern neuroscience has discovered what the ancient rishis knew intuitively. Your sense of self is nothing more than neural patterns firing in specific sequences. The default mode network in your brain constantly reinforces the story of who you think you are, creating a persistent sense of a separate self. But this network can be fundamentally rewired. Studies on advanced meditators show dramatic changes in brain structure, with increased gray matter in areas associated with awareness and decreased activity in regions that maintain self-referential thinking. As you approach this first portal, you might notice your life beginning to feel unstable. Old relationships may start to feel inauthentic. Career paths that once seemed meaningful might suddenly feel empty. This isn't crisis, it's consciousness preparing to shed what no longer serves its evolution. The Bhagavad Gita describes this as the moment when Arjuna, representing the individual soul, faces the battlefield of consciousness and realizes that everything he thought he knew about himself must be surrendered. The dissolution process follows precise neurochemical changes that ancient texts describe with remarkable accuracy. When you truly surrender the constructed self, your brain's production of DMT increases, the same compound released during near-death experiences. Your pineal gland, which the Vedas call the seat of higher consciousness, begins to activate dormant neural pathways. This isn't mysticism, it's measurable neurobiology happening exactly as the ancient texts predicted. But crossing this first portal requires more than intellectual understanding. You must be willing to sit with the terror of non-existence, to let every story you've told yourself about who you are crumble into dust. The Mandukya Upanishad guides you through this process by showing you that what you call consciousness has 4 distinct states: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and the 4th state, turiya, which is pure awareness itself. As you learn to identify with turiya rather than the temporary states of consciousness, the grip of personal identity begins to loosen. Once the old self has dissolved, you enter the second portal, the recognition of consciousness as the fundamental reality. This isn't a belief or philosophy, it's a direct perception that changes how your nervous system processes information. The Isha Upanishad opens with the declaration that consciousness pervades everything in the universe. Modern physics echoes this in the observer effect, where consciousness appears to be necessary for the collapse of quantum wave functions into observable reality. At this stage, you begin to experience what researchers call expanded states of consciousness. Your brain waves shift from the beta frequencies of ordinary thinking to the alpha and theta ranges associated with heightened awareness. Time perception changes dramatically. Minutes can feel like hours, and hours can pass like minutes. This isn't disorientation, it's your consciousness learning to operate independent of the linear time that governs material existence. The Chandogya Upanishad describes this shift with the famous declaration, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. You begin to recognize that the consciousness observing your thoughts is the same consciousness that moves the stars and grows the trees. This recognition fundamentally rewires your neural networks, creating new connections between brain regions that were previously isolated. The artificial separation between observer and observed begins to dissolve. As you practice maintaining this expanded awareness, something remarkable happens to your perception of others. The boundaries between self and other become increasingly transparent. And you might find yourself knowing things about people without being told, sensing their emotional states as clearly as your own. This isn't psychic ability in the supernatural sense, it's the natural result of consciousness recognizing itself in all forms. Mirror neurons in your brain, previously limited to basic empathy, begin functioning at levels that neuroscientists are only beginning to understand. The third portal involves understanding and mastering the vibrational nature of reality. The Vedas declare that the entire universe emerged from the primordial sound Om, which modern physics translates as the fundamental frequency underlying all existence. Every thought, emotion, and intention you generate creates specific vibrational patterns that interact with the quantum field, literally shaping the reality you experience. Recent discoveries in cymatics, the study of visible sound, demonstrate how different frequencies create distinct geometric patterns in matter. When you change your internal frequency through conscious intention, you're not just thinking positive thoughts, you're literally restructuring the quantum information patterns that determine what becomes possible in your experience. The Vedic mantras weren't primitive chants, they were precision instruments for tuning consciousness to specific frequencies of reality. You might begin to notice that certain thoughts or emotional states consistently attract corresponding experiences. This isn't confirmation bias, it's the law of resonance operating at quantum levels. When your consciousness maintains a particular vibrational frequency, it acts like a tuning fork, attracting experiences that match that frequency. The ancient rishis mapped these correlations with mathematical precision, creating formulas for consciousness that we're only now beginning to verify through quantum field research. The fourth portal opens when you recognize your thoughts as creative forces rather than passive observations. The Yoga Vasishtha, one of the most advanced Vedic texts, explains that the entire phenomenal world is nothing but consciousness, appearing to itself as form. Every thought you think sends ripples through the unified field, contributing to the holographic projection you experience as physical reality. Neuroscientists studying neuroplasticity have discovered that simply thinking about an action creates measurable changes in the motor cortex, the same changes that occur when actually performing the action. The brain cannot distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and actual experiences. The Vedic seers understood this principle and developed sophisticated visualization techniques for literally rewiring reality at the quantum level. As you practice conscious thought creation, you'll notice your ability to influence external circumstances increasing dramatically. This isn't magical thinking, it's applied quantum mechanics. Your focused attention collapses quantum possibilities into specific outcomes. The more coherent your consciousness becomes, the more precisely you can navigate probability fields to manifest desired experiences. The Patanjali Yoga Sutras describe this as Sankalpa Shakti, the power of focused intention to reshape reality. The fifth portal reveals the interconnected nature of all existence through direct experience rather than philosophical understanding. The Vedantic concept of Indra's net describes reality as an infinite web of jewels, each one reflecting all others. Modern systems theory and complexity science have rediscovered this ancient insight. Everything in the universe is connected to everything else through invisible information networks. Your consciousness at this level begins operating non-locally, accessing information from the unified field that exists beyond the constraints of space and time. Studies of remote viewing and distant healing demonstrate that consciousness can gather and transmit information instantaneously across any distance. This isn't supernatural phenomenon, it's consciousness operating according to quantum principles that transcend classical physics limitations. You might find yourself spontaneously knowing things you've never learned, understanding complex scientific or philosophical concepts without study. This isn't miraculous, it's your consciousness accessing the Akashic records, the information field that stores all knowledge and experience. Quantum information theory suggests that information, once created, cannot be destroyed and remains accessible to consciousness operating at sufficient coherence levels. The sixth portal involves the integration of polarities that have been artificially separated by conditioned thinking. The Vedas teach that ultimate reality transcends all dualities, light and dark, good and evil, matter and consciousness, self and other. At quantum levels, these apparent opposites are revealed as complementary aspects of unified processes, like wave and particle being two ways of observing the same quantum phenomenon. Your nervous system undergoes profound changes as it learns to hold paradox without needing resolution. The corpus callosum, connecting your brain's two hemispheres, develops enhanced communication pathways. Logical processing and intuitive knowing begin operating as a unified intelligence rather than competing systems. This integration creates what researchers call whole brain consciousness, allowing access to previously unavailable cognitive capabilities. As you embody this integrated awareness, you might notice that conflicts in your external life begin resolving spontaneously. Relationships that were previously challenging become harmonious without conscious effort. Professional situations that seemed impossible suddenly present elegant solutions. This happens because consciousness operating beyond duality naturally creates win-win outcomes, finding paths that serve all parties involved. The seventh and final portal is the recognition of your true nature as pure consciousness itself, beyond all individual characteristics or cosmic roles. The Advaita Vedanta teachings point to this ultimate reality. Brahman, the unchanging consciousness that appears as all changing forms. This isn't a belief system or spiritual philosophy, it's the direct recognition of what you actually are beneath all temporary identifications. At this level, the question of personal transformation becomes irrelevant because there's no separate person to transform. You recognize that you are the consciousness in which all experiences arise and dissolve, including the experience of being a limited individual. This recognition brings what the Vedas call moksha, liberation from the illusion of being bound by any conditions or circumstances. Neuroscientist studies of individuals reporting this level of realization show remarkable brain activity patterns. The default mode network, responsible for self-referential thinking, shows minimal activity. Instead, there's increased coherence across all brain regions, suggesting unified processing that transcends the typical subject-object structure of ordinary consciousness. And the brain appears to be functioning as a single, integrated system rather than a collection of competing modules. But here's what's crucial to understand. Recognizing your nature as pure consciousness doesn't eliminate your ability to function as an individual. Instead, it provides an unshakable foundation of peace and clarity from which all actions arise spontaneously. The Bhagavad Gita describes this as nishkama karma, action without attachment to results, flowing naturally from established consciousness rather than driven by personal desires or fears. Your daily life becomes an expression of consciousness exploring itself through form rather than a struggle to achieve particular outcomes. Decision-making becomes effortless because you're no longer calculating what might benefit a separate self, and instead actions arise from the intelligence of the unified field, automatically serving the evolution of consciousness in all its expressions. As you integrate this ultimate recognition, you might notice that your presence alone begins affecting others in profound ways. People feel peaceful around you without understanding why. Complex problems seem to resolve in your vicinity. This isn't personal magnetism or charisma, it's consciousness recognizing itself and naturally aligning circumstances to support awakening wherever it appears. The Vedic tradition teaches that one person established in self-realization influences the consciousness of thousands around them. Recent studies in collective consciousness research suggest this might be literally true. Coherent consciousness appears to create morphic fields that influence the probability of awakening in others, making spiritual evolution more likely for everyone in the surrounding environment. But remember, these 7 portals aren't sequential stages you complete once and leave behind. They represent deepening levels of the same recognition, each one available right now if your consciousness is prepared to receive it. The Vedas are clear that enlightenment isn't something you achieve in the future. It's something you are right now, temporarily obscured by identification with temporary experiences. The question isn't whether you're ready for these portals of transformation. The question is whether you're willing to stop postponing the recognition of what you actually are. Every moment you spend seeking transformation in the future is a moment of avoiding the transformation that's available right now. The ancient rishis discovered that consciousness is always already perfect, complete, and free, simply appearing to itself as temporary experiences of limitation. Your willingness to recognize this truth, right here and right now, is what determines whether these portals open for you. No preparation, no practice, no qualification is ultimately necessary because you are already what you seek to become. The only requirement is the courage to stop believing the story that you're somehow separate from the consciousness that is your true nature. As you sit with this recognition, notice what's already present before any thoughts arise. Notice the awareness in which these words are appearing and disappearing. That awareness isn't personal to you. It's the same consciousness that the Vedas describe as the ultimate reality behind all appearances. You don't need to develop this awareness. You need to stop overlooking it in favor of more complex spiritual concepts. The 7 portals of transformation are simultaneously the most advanced spiritual technology ever developed and the simplest recognition possible. You are already what you seek. The Vedas spent thousands of years mapping the territory of consciousness, not to make awakening complicated, but to show you all the ways you might be making it unnecessarily difficult. Every portal, every practice, every teaching points back to the same simple recognition of what's already here. So the final question isn't whether you're ready for transformation. Final question is, are you willing to stop transforming and simply be what you are? Are you ready to recognize that the one who would pass through portals and the consciousness those portals reveal are not 2 different things? Can you accept that the search for your true nature is the only thing preventing you from recognizing that you are already that which you seek? The ancient Vedic seers discovered that consciousness is not something you have, it's something you are. Not something you can develop or lose, but the unchanging reality in which all development and loss appear. Not something you can be ready or unready for, but the readiness itself that recognizes truth when it appears. And this recognition is available right now, not as the result of passing through 7 portals, but as the consciousness that would pass through them. The choice is always here, always now. Continue seeking what you already are in experiences you're not yet having, or recognize what you are in the experience you're having right now. The Vedas are complete, the portals are open, and transformation is here waiting for the simple recognition that there's no one separate from it who could need to be transformed.